Let me tell you something strange about niceness. We live in a world that praises the agreeable, the polite, the easy to be around. We're told that being nice is the highest social virtue, that harmony is maturity, that harmlessness is goodness. Yet some of the nicest people you know feel quietly unseen, quietly resentful, quietly exhausted. And here's the question that lingers beneath that smile. What if being harmless isn't the same thing as being kind? What if niceness, in some cases, is not generosity, but self-erasure? It's easy to assume nice people are simply good-hearted, and many are, but that's not the full picture. Beneath the surface, there's an entire psychology unfolding, a subtle contract between safety and belonging, a quiet negotiation between authenticity and acceptance. See, for some people, niceness is not warmth, it's protection. You recognize them instantly. They apologize for things that aren't their fault. They say whatever you want before they check in with themselves. They laugh softly when interrupted. They smooth over tension before it has a chance to breathe. They are easy, so easy. They don't take up space in meetings. They don't argue at dinner. They don't ask for too much in relationships. They are the ones who adjust, the ones who accommodate, the ones who understand. And the world loves them for it. Such a good person, so low drama, so mature. But sometimes, late at night, when no one is watching, something stirs beneath that composure. A quiet question. Why do I feel invisible when I've done everything right? Psychologists have found something fascinating about chronic niceness. People who over-identify with being agreeable often score high in empathy, but also in conflict avoidance and fear of rejection. It's not that they don't have opinions, it's that they learned somewhere along the way that expressing them came at a cost. Maybe that cost was subtle. A parent who withdrew affection when challenged, a classroom where speaking up invited ridicule, a relationship where disagreement meant emotional distance. So the nervous system adapted. Be pleasant, be agreeable, be harmless, because harmless people don't get abandoned. And here's the reframe. It's not about being kind, it's about being safe. Niceness in this form isn't generosity, it's strategy. It's the art of minimizing friction so you can maximize belonging. And maybe that's not weakness. Maybe that's intelligence shaped by experience. But intelligence can become identity. And when harmlessness becomes who you are, something else quietly disappears. Your edges, your no, your anger. And here's what's often misunderstood about nice people. They are not empty. They are full. Full of opinions they don't voice. Full of desires they don't name. Full of anger they don't permit themselves to feel. They don't lack depth. They lack permission. Beneath the surface, there's a concept psychologists sometimes call fawning, a stress response where you appease to survive. Not fight, not flight, but please. And in a culture that worships agreeableness, that survival strategy gets rewarded. Because let's be honest, we live in systems that prefer compliance over complexity. Workplaces reward team players. Families reward the easy child. Relationships praise the chill partner. In a world that constantly says, don't be difficult, choosing to be harmless becomes a form of self-preservation. But here's the paradox. The more harmless you become, the less known you are. And the less known you are, the lonelier you feel. Because intimacy requires friction. It requires difference. It requires honesty. It requires the risk of being inconvenient. So what happens when your entire identity is built on never being a problem? Who are you when you finally say no? Because think about it. When was the last time you disappointed someone on purpose? Not to hurt them, not to rebel, but simply to honor yourself. And what did that feel like in your body? But not everyone who is nice is afraid. Some are genuinely gentle. Some are grounded. Some have done the inner work and chosen softness as strength. And that matters, because niceness itself isn't the issue. The issue is compulsion, when you cannot not be nice. There's a deep philosophical undertone to harmlessness. In a world that constantly rewards visibility and dominance, being gentle can feel like resistance. But in a world that fears conflict, being endlessly agreeable can also be disappearance. This is where the paradox lives. Niceness was designed to create harmony, yet sometimes it creates distance. Because when you erase your sharpness, you also erase your shape. And without shape, how can anyone truly meet you? Maybe that's why some of the nicest people carry quiet resentment, not because they are bitter, but because their inner life has never been invited to the table. The longer someone lives as harmless, the more they begin to feel untethered from their own instincts. They hesitate before speaking. They over-explain small preferences. They feel guilt for having limits. And slowly, almost invisibly, they begin to believe that being loved requires being small. But perhaps real love was never asking for that. Perhaps it was waiting for the full version of you all along. Studies on boundary setting and self-concept show that people who suppress their needs to maintain harmony often experience higher stress levels and lower relationship satisfaction over time. The body keeps track of what the mouth refuses to say. When authenticity and behavior diverge, something psychologists call incongruence emerges, and incongruence creates tension internally, even if everything looks peaceful externally. In other words, chronic niceness can become a quiet stress response, not visible, but real. Sometimes the nicest person in the room is also the most misunderstood. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's calculation. Their softness isn't weakness, it's adaptation. But maybe real confidence isn't being harmless. Maybe it's being whole, whole enough to be kind and clear, gentle and firm, warm and boundaried. Maybe that's what quiet strength looks like. Not dominance, not aggression, but the ability to disappoint without collapsing. There's something sacred about that shift. The moment you realize that kindness without self-respect is performance, and that love that requires your shrinking isn't love, it's comfort. Maybe some parts of you were never meant to be sanded down. Maybe your edges are not flaws. Maybe they are proof that you exist. So here's the strange thing about niceness. Being harmless doesn't always mean being kind. Sometimes it means being afraid. Sometimes it means being brilliant at survival. Sometimes it means you learned that love required silence. But being whole might mean risking a little friction. Because being kind doesn't require disappearing, and being loving doesn't require shrinking. Maybe the deepest form of goodness isn't about never causing discomfort. Maybe it's about telling the truth gently. And maybe, just maybe, the most radical thing a nice person can do is let themselves be fully seen.